how we can be prepared for the next generation of using the knowledge.
Knowledge is the way that people were able to kind of, give something to the next generation. In the 16th century, what is it that you can actually, in some ways, share with other people? And but I think ultimately what you want to give individuals are these skills and abilities to actually independently address, things that happen to them and new situations that get generated as we, develop new techniques and stuff like that. And that's the reason why I'm very interested in basically creating video libraries, because it seems to me that in the past, that wasn't really an option. But today, we can actually have the very best people do things and, have them think out loud or give retrospective reports to give a sense here of, where they are. And that's where I think it's almost easier to think of them as being on a journey where in order to get to them, you're not going to be able to just take a helicopter. You're going to have to actually follow their path. And there is aspects of what they did that really wasn't useful. So they would be able to actually help you eliminate some of the incorrect turns that they took.
Amazing. And today that they're trying to do something like that, or you can imagine that it's possible?
Well, I'm talking to people about it. And I think, for example, I've been working with some medical doctors. So when it comes to x-rays, especially after they started to digitalize these pictures, you can create now basically libraries of past cases.
Oh, okay.
And I guess the argument that I've been trying to make here with some of these other people is that, this is a much more effective way of learning how to basically do correct diagnosis, as opposed to basically be sitting in a clinic and just waiting for patients coming in. And many of these patients, I guess nobody really knows what the problem is. So what kind of feedback can you get now from trying to diagnose their problems? Whereas if you wait a year, you can now have that same x-ray and you would know a lot more.
Amazing. And when you said about X-ray, I remember this quiet eye period that you use the gaze to see the gaze, the where the people are looking at. So you can check and you can use the X-ray and ask for an expert to look to the X-ray, and then you make the student to look the same X-ray, and now you can compare.
I think actually that has been done and it's not working. So basically, right. So having medical students try to mimic how experts look at things doesn't seem to improve their performance. And I guess that would be consistent with my own idea that the way you look is a consequence of what you're thinking. So basically, you can't just do something and induce the thought processes. You have to kind of learn and develop those mental representations that are driving what you're doing.
Interesting. It's like the second wave. It's not the first wave. The first wave is the mental process. So
right, and I think it makes a lot of sense if you think about activities. I mean, you wouldn't want to have a mathematician, try to mimic how they're looking at equations as a way here of helping people improve their mathematical skills.
Yeah, makes sense for me too. Now with you, I couldn't realize that makes sense for me. There's some question today, a big one that is in your mind, a big one.
Well, I'm not so sure that I'm being bothered. I mean, I think that's one of the nice things, unlike exploring kind of the surface part of our Earth, that you will run out of places to look. Science is sort of has a boundary, and then basically if you want to go beyond the current understanding, then that's basically going to allow you to go further. But I would say that, there are many things that I'm interested in, but it's just pick a couple. One, I'm getting much more interested in analyzing people who seem to have difficulty improving. So the focus up to this point, has been trying to understand how those people are very successful do things. And almost by, comparison, you could say that other people may not have done it as well. But there are these claims here about people who seem to actually improve very little. So that actually is a big area where I'm collecting now papers and references, in order to be able to say something hopefully interesting about that.
Amazing. Sounds good for me, because I don't know if you I ever think about the word talent, and we can jump a little bit of the word. And you have a background in church, but there's a myth. The Matthew is a myth of talent. And you heard about this one? You know that or no?
Yes, I wouldn't be able to recall it exactly, but I certainly have heard of it. But I think one of the questions with even that word, which I tend to avoid just because it seems like different people sort of have different meanings associated with it, so it just creates confusion. But if you think about talent as actually the ultimate performance, you can talk about that actually without really arguing about how that individual got to that point.
Okay, makes sense. But because for me, is it a very I work a lot to change the talent definition. Like I know there's a lot of different people talk about talent in a different perspective, but in a big picture is when you say talent, you say something that the people had, like the innate talent. So for this kind of thinking that I don't like, and I try to fight back, because I think there's a problem. I don't know if you agreed, but Francis Galton, that you mentioned in Cambridge expertise, Francis Galton was make the research, and the aspect of this kind of talent, artist talent, and all this kind of talent, innate talent, what came from the parents. I think this could get to the point to make like eugenics problem, in United States, and after that the eugenic thing could get a big problem for us thinking about in a perspective of the history. So I have a very strong opinion counter this talent notion, definition, and even that is different between people is all this kind of thinking that you received that from your parents and now you're gonna use that. I don't like it so for that reason that
I don't know if you read the Ericsson and Charnas American Psychologist paper.
No.
Well, I can send you a copy of it.
Please.
But basically, in that paper, we try to trace kind of talent. And in the Middle Ages, there was basically, you could say, an extreme talent view where basically the nobility were defined here by your parents, and basically your place in the world was kind of defined by your parents. And it's basically in that kind of climate that basically, people were starting to argue that even individuals at these lower classes could now have been given gifts by God that would now elevate them and make them worthy of the support that typically only nobility and basically the warrior class would get. And I think if you read Galton's biography, he was very sickly. So I think he always struggled with basically, his abilities and whether he was kind of more or less predestined here to making a major contribution or not. And I think that influenced, basically a lot of what he was kind of researching and doing. But I think given that complex history, and if you look at, like India and the caste system and basically virtually any European country, I looked at some interesting work where they actually looked at what happened with the nobility from the 19th century in Sweden. Where are they actually today?
And then?
And basically argued about, what are the things that parents could do, like helping you become a doctor or whatever, that would somehow, give you a more privileged position.
You felt like a polymath or not?
And basically, that's again a concept that I probably wouldn't touch, because you really hardly ever define what sort of ability level you need to acquire to count something as a skill.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the problems today. I also think that if you go back 300 years, there was so little knowledge that basically, almost by definition, by today's standards, you would be a polymath here. You were basically, into philosophy, and you were doing a little bit of science, botany here, and a little of this. But I don't know what relevance that has for today's society, where basically if you were to move some of these amateur scientists, they wouldn't maybe even get admitted to university in our current society, given the prerequisites and everything.
Okay.
So it's, I tried to look for issues where I think that I can make a contribution that aren't so incredibly complex that when you say something, it's almost like by definition, you're going to run into somebody in a little field here who would say that they contradict you. So, but anyway, just because that's how I do things, it shouldn't necessarily be advice for other people.
Okay. Something that came to my mind about results and process. Correct if I'm wrong, but one of the ways to check the difference between the expert and the non-expert is the results.
Exactly. That's sort of our claim here about the expert performance, that you actually need to be able to reproduce and be able to demonstrate something in order for us to even have a phenomena that could be studied.
Okay. So in this case, my problem is it a little paradox when you are practicing? Because using John Wooden perspective, he said in the book, one of his book, he never asked for victory. He wants to make what we train, what we practice. I want to know, how can we handle this? Because everybody looks to the results and try to focus on the results. But actually, we use the results to say if somebody is an expert or not. But we didn't use that to our present, our practice and our training. So it's a little bit paradox, because we don't have to look to the results, but the results are the definition.
My feeling has always been that you can't do better than your best. So if you actually focus in on doing your best, you may win or you may not, but basically that's outside of your control. So basically, wanting to win, fine, but the way you maximize your chances to win is basically now by, working and trying out to improve on the things that you can control.
Okay.
And I remember actually an interview with a the golfer, what's his name?
Tiger Woods?
Tiger, right. So Tiger was interviewed basically after kind of a performance in a tournament. And basically they asked him, well, you didn't do so well. And basically what Tiger said, it was basically, I was doing as well as I can. It was just that the balls weren't dropping. Recognizing now that if he has a shot, what he can control is maybe the radius around the hole that the ball will stop at. But that's not the same thing as it's dropping. And so chance factors could have you playing exactly as well as you do during practice and other tournaments, but it's just that the ball is not dropping.
Yeah.
And recognizing that, I think, actually I wrote a chapter about golf where that was one of the key ideas, that if you believe that you actually would be able to kind of sink the ball on every shot, that's probably not a very good feedback loop. So instead, looking at what you're actually doing in a way that now allows you to kind of try to improve that, because looking for that chance component that has to do with the dropping of the ball will actually make it harder for you to learn, because you're actually trying out to control things that you can't control.
I don't know if maybe you remember a Brazilian tennis player, Gustavo Kirten. You know this name or no?
It sounds sort of familiar, but I don't know any specifics about him.
He were our best tennis player ever, and beat Sampras, Federer, and he was a very, 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 very good. One of the things that make his career shorter was a hip problem. Okay, a hip problem in his right hip. One of the best movements of him was the forehand, but he makes a different movement. Comparing like Federer, he makes a different movement. He make a different way. Okay, so some people said that this kind of movement was a very good thing of him. It was a strength, but short his career. So when you said about fundamentals, I was thinking, my gosh, imagine so paradox. You have the fundamentals, but it's not the best way to do, but the results are so good, and you keep with the results. So now he had 500 games, and Federer has 1,500 games. Probably he focused on the winning process. Okay, it's working, but it's not good in the long term.
Well, and again, I don't know enough about physiology and kind of movement executions, but would you say that there are other players who was doing what he was doing who actually do have a long career? Or was basically the shortness of his career a function of the fact that he was doing it in an unusual way?
Yeah, I think it's in an unusual way that short his career, because it's the right side, and it's a strange movement, because you have to use a lot of his hip to make the movement, and everybody makes like the movement like steady, like stable. Federer makes the same, and all the players make the same. I don't have the numbers, but I think this could.
Yeah, but just to speculate, it might be interesting, because we know that handedness and other things. So if you do something that's different from everyone else, that could potentially now give you an advantage.
Yeah.
So basically he was, potentially, because he was doing it differently, got him an edge, but then basically the physiological kind of problems limited the length of his career.